Hi, my name is Alexis. I'm a relationship counselor and I help a lot of people dealing with breakups. In this video, I'm gonna explain why sometimes we are still depressed weeks and months after a breakup. You might have heard from your friends, time will heal all wounds, and that, after a few months, you'll forget about your ex. It's obviously slightly more complex than that, and it has nothing to do with your grit, with your resilience. There's something obviously more unconscious, and we're gonna discover this together in this video.
IGetMyExBack.com. Everyone deserves a second chance.
So first of all, if we look at breakups, how we perceive breakups. Breakup is rejection, is feeling rejected. And when we have this sense of rejection, especially from what we call in attachment theory a primary attachment figure, that creates this feeling of abandonment. Okay, so really primitive feelings that we get rejected by the person we love the most. And this fear of abandonment, if you're familiar with attachment theory, is very common for people who have an anxious attachment style. Now, if you know your attachment style and you know that you have an anxious attachment style, this will be extremely relevant. But what I'm about to explain, the reason you feel so depressed even months or years after the breakup, might not necessarily be linked to attachment. The thing is, it's very hard for you to let go of this situation because you feel it's unfair. When your partner broke up with you, they took the decision for you. And usually, when it comes as a shock, the way to deal with the breakup becomes more complex because of the time you invested, because of the projects that you had, because of anything that you projected in your mind. The vision, the future together has been destroyed by that person. They pull the rug from underneath your feet. And that's unfair, right? And how do we react? What's our reaction? What's our response when something is unfair? There is and I will put the link in the description or as a comment. There's a very famous experiment of someone treating two chimps unfairly. One is rewarded something sweet for an experiment, for an action. The other one is rewarded cucumber or something like that. And the one realizing that he's doing the same thing as his neighbors, and his neighbor from the cage next to him start throwing cucumbers back to the scientist. It's how we react when we feel a situation is unfair. Our first reaction is that reaction of the chimp response, as we call it in neuroscience. We have three brains, and that's coming from the book The Chimp Paradox, a very great book that I would recommend you to read if you're interested in that topic. And when you read on this book, you understand also that the chimp has this deep need to be accepted, to be loved. That's what happens in our brain, and also that's what happens. That's why the author described it as the chimp brain, because if you study chimps, they need to be part of the group. They need to bond with peers, right? And for them, it's a question of survival. They need to be accepted in the tribe. They need to be loved. And that's why sometimes with chimps, actually consistently with chimps, not sometimes consistently, the ones, when they feel neglected, they will invest more because they want to earn the trust from the chief of the tribe, from anyone in the tribe. But as soon as they get rejected, they will invest more and more. And that's a chimp response to this situation. These emotional reactions can linger, can stay there. This anger, this sadness. But that's not what keeps you anxious or depressed. So what I described, this chimp response, is usually after the shock that I described at the beginning. A very violent situation, you feel rejected, pushed away, you want to fight back, you want to cling, okay? That's why sometimes after a breakup we find ourselves being super clingy, being super needy, wanted to confront our partner, spamming their inbox, and so on and so forth. But that's not the reason you feel depressed months after a breakup. The anxiety, the depression takes form because of three different things actually. First one is this idea of unfinished business. As I described, it's the idea that even months after the breakup, you still have this difficulty dealing with those future moments, with those things. If you wanted to have kids, I cannot have the kids that I wanted to have with that person. So it's the idea of how can you say goodbye to those moments together. It's very similar to a grieving process. So grieving the relationship, grieving those moments, those walks by the beach together, those mornings together, sharing a coffee, the evenings, watching Netflix or whatever. That's why sometimes you might find yourself with these triggers throughout the day because you haven't really said goodbye to those events. And so anytime you do an activity that reminds you of your ex, you're brought back in this cognitive dissonance in the way of you want to be there, but you can't be there. Okay, so one reason you're still depressed is because you haven't really dealt with that, and we'll discuss about that. So that's what we would call undeclared losses, the hopes and the dreams. Because by, for example, looking at the stories of your ex, you think, oh no, there's no harm in that. But by doing that, what you're doing is you are unconsciously entertaining some form of hope, of dreams. Wishing, I wish I could be there. Wishing, I could exchange on that message or that quote or that image that they are sharing on social media. But you can't because they decided to end the relationship. And so the first advice I would give you is to come to peace with this. This idea that you can't share those moments with that person. And say goodbye to all of these moments. This video is if you want to move on, if you want to forget your ex. But don't get me wrong, if you want to get back with your ex, there's a moment of grieving as well. Because unless you treated those things, unless you built some resilience being on your own, it's going to be very hard to be attractive, very hard to talk with in an effective manner with your partner. Second thing is your insecurities. So very often, the reason your ex broke up with you, or if you have an anxious attachment style, so it could be and or the simple fact of rejecting you, of abandoning you, will make something from the past resurface. Let me give you kind of a personal example. Back in the days, I had a girlfriend that I was in love with, and she broke up with me, and she said something that's really created a dent. She told me, you're not reliable. And it's true that sometimes I'm really struggling with being on time at appointments. I'm kind of disorganized with my time, with where I am. As you know, I'm a former avoidant, so it's very hard for me to commit. It used to be very hard for me to commit on some plans. And when she said that, it reminded me of other events when I was a child with my parents, where people who told me, I can't rely on you. You're untrustworthy. That was very hard for me to accept. And of course, the rejection, the idea that she didn't want to continue the relationship, that was hard. But what was harder was these words. Because in fact, they were true. And that had nothing to do with her, that had nothing to do with the relationship, that has something to do with me. And I didn't study psychology because of that breakup, and I didn't become a psychologist, a therapist because of that. But it's true that I've analyzed those things. And that's the thing you need to do after this breakup, is to really analyze those shortcomings, those insecurities. Because I can guarantee you, the reason it's so hard for you to move on, the reason it's so hard for you to accept this breakup, is because there's some things that you haven't dealt with. And your ex taking the decision to end the relationship with you is challenging you this. It's challenging your self-image, attacking the person you are. In a way, they're not necessarily doing it to hurt you, but it's that reflection on those things that you might perceive as failures. Now it's your job to really face those things. Good, because I'm dying. And the third reason why it's so hard, and the reason sometimes it takes years to overcome a breakup, is because you avoid feeling your emotions. Feeling sad isn't pleasant, being upset isn't pleasant, and we don't want to feel that. The reason you're anxious and depressed is not because you feel sad, it's because you're failing to address. You're failing to unpack those feelings. Anxiety is when you have these unconscious thoughts and you don't do anything about that. You let them take the lead. Depression is the same, that feeling of numbness. You don't want to do anything, and it's very much unconscious, right? You don't feel great, you are low in energy. In order to feel better, you have to unpack those things, to face those emotions, right? When you feel those things, it's those symptoms, those physical symptoms, it's those negative emotions taking the lead. So it's very important for you to face them. It's very important to bring awareness, because sometimes they're unconscious. Sometimes we feel like we're not feeling great, but it's just by starting to notice, starting to investigate what's going on, what's the rationale. And for sure, it's linked to the number 2. It's linked to some form of insecurity. It's very important because if you don't do it, it's going to come back. Nobody can remove the triggers that you have in your life that might remind you of the fact that you're single or the fact that you broke up with your partner. Perhaps you have kids with your partner. Your kids will remind you every single day that you used to be married or in relationship with their father, with their mother. Okay? So failing to address those things, failing to really understand those things will prolong this sensation of heartbreak. So what should you do? First of all, if you feel in crisis or thoughts of self-harm, contact someone locally, a psychologist or a very good friend, and talk about your feelings, talk about your emotions. It's very important. I mean, I'm making those videos to help you gain clarity, but it's very important for you to talk to someone and do something about that. Another very important thing is find ways to structure your thoughts, whether it's journaling, whether it's, so I have a service, it's WhatsApp coaching, where you can use it as journaling, but you can also use it to discuss with me. I've also created a workbook to really structure your thoughts, and the course that goes with this workbook. The idea is to really provide a structure. I know it's overwhelming. I know what helps is that feeling of progress. Don't get me wrong. It's not a linear process, but not knowing where to go, not knowing what to do will make it even harder. So look at those things. There are other materials. I'm not the only one talking about grief. I'm not the only one talking about heartbreak. But find something that you like, that resonates with you, and find a structure to follow. The easiest it is for you to follow, the better, because you're going to stop being overwhelmed. You're going to stop being anxious by all the information, but everything that you have to do. It might look like a mountain to climb, and that's why you need to take one step at a time. So having a structure or having someone to discuss with you on a regular basis will help you feel the progress and will definitely address all those things that you need to work on. So find a buddy, find a friend, find a therapist to provide that support. You cannot get any emotional support on your own. That's not working. Okay, so it doesn't have to be necessarily with a therapist like myself. It could be with a best friend, it could be with someone in your family. We've started to create a Telegram channel where people can discuss with each other. It works really well. I'm going to decide how we can transition this, because it's a bit hard for me to follow and facilitate. But I know there's a lot of value for people to discuss and engage with people who are going through the similar situation. Let me know as well. Let's use this video to share what worked for you, to share, any books you've read, any course that you took, any thought, anything that really helped you progress in this journey of healing. Take care of yourself, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Power for a long time. Get up, nah, I ain't a quitter. Toss me the ball, I'm a really big hitter. Big picture, I'm a straight killer.